You know, when we talk about web security, it's easy to think of a hacker trying to kick down one single digital door. But that's not really how it works. A modern web application is more like this giant, sprawling building with hundreds of windows, vents, and maybe some hidden entrances nobody even remembers. And if just one of those is left open, it can lead to absolute disaster, data loss, financial ruin, and just a complete breakdown of trust. So let's peel back the layers and see what we're really up against.
Security researchers have actually cataloged at least 100 distinct, known ways that an attacker can target a web application. 100. Let that sink in for a second. That number, yeah, it's a little intimidating, isn't it? And that really brings us to the main question here. If you're building websites or running a business online, how in the world are you supposed to protect yourself against a list that long? Do you have to become an expert in all 100 things? I mean, that sounds impossible. Before we get to the answer, let's just take a second to appreciate the sheer scale of this challenge. Just seeing the list helps you understand why a different approach is so necessary. Okay, so this right here, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking SQL injection, cross-site scripting, command injection, all these classic heavy-hitting attacks. And trying to memorize this whole list one by one, it's totally overwhelming, and honestly, it's just not a good way to build a defense.
And here's the secret. You don't actually need to memorize every single vulnerability. The real key is to start seeing the patterns, to understand that most of these attacks are really just different flavors of a few core ideas. It's all about thinking in categories. And once you start grouping these threats into a logical framework, that terrifying list of 100 things suddenly shrinks down to just a handful of concepts that you can actually get your head around and, build defenses for.
And this is where it all starts to click. Almost every web vulnerability you can imagine falls into one of these big categories. You've got injection attacks, problems with authentication, data getting exposed, and so on. See, if you can understand and defend against an entire category, you're automatically defending against all the individual attacks that fall under it.
So let's see how this works. We'll start with the first major category, injection. At their core, these attacks are all about tricking an application into running malicious commands by feeding it input it doesn't expect. It's kind of like telling your smart speaker to play some music, but you secretly mumble and unlock the front door right in the middle of the command.
A classic, and probably the most famous example of this, is SQL injection. This is where an attacker finds, say, a login form or a search box, and instead of typing a username, they type a command for the database itself. If the website isn't built carefully, it might just run that command, no questions asked.
And the code they use can look deceptively simple. This little piece of text right here is a classic trick. It basically tells the database, hey, forget the password you were looking for, just check if 1 equals 1. And since 1 always equals 1, the database says, yep, looks good, and lets them right in. It's like a universal skeleton key for badly secured login forms.
So this sets up a pretty clear battlefield. The attacker is trying to sneak commands into places that are only supposed to hold data. The developer's defense is to use something called parameterized queries. It's a fancy term, but all it means is they build a strong wall that makes sure anything a user types is only ever treated as plain data, and never, ever as a command to be executed.
All right, next up is another massive category, broken authentication. So if injection attacks are all about tricking the system from the inside, this category is all about stealing someone's identity to walk right through the front door. It's about getting the keys to the digital kingdom. Yeah, this isn't about fooling the database code, it's about fooling the login page. This bucket covers every single tactic an attacker can use to impersonate a real user, whether that's by guessing their password or straight up hijacking a session while they're already logged in.
And the methods here are pretty diverse. You've got your classic brute force attack. That's basically the digital version of trying every single key on a massive keychain until one finally works. But then you have something subtler, like session hijacking. That's where an attacker snags your temporary access pass, your session cookie, and just waltzes right in, completely bypassing the need for a password. And just like before, for every attack, there's a defense. To stop someone from hijacking a session, you can enforce multi-factor authentication. To stop them from just guessing passwords all day, you put a limit on how many login attempts they can make. It's this constant cat-and-mouse game.
So we've only dug into 2 categories. But as you can probably guess, the variety of threats is just huge. So let's do a quick fire round just to get a feel for the sheer breadth of what defenders are up against.
I mean, the list is just vast.
It covers everything from something as simple as a security misconfiguration, like a developer forgetting to change a default password, all the way to complex attacks like privilege escalation. That's where an attacker gets in with a low-level account and then cleverly finds a way to become a full-blown system admin with the keys to everything.
And things are always changing, right? Modern apps use APIs for everything, and that opens up a whole new world of potential problems. Then you have these sneaky client-side attacks, like clickjacking. It's a wild one. An attacker puts an invisible button over something you think you're clicking. So you might think you're clicking play on a video, but you're actually clicking a hidden button to transfer money. So clever and so dangerous.
Okay, let's take a breath. Seeing all of that laid out can feel like a lot. But remember, the whole point of this isn't to get scared, it's to get prepared. So let's flip the script and look at how to turn this mountain of scary information into a clear plan for defense.
The big takeaway here is really to adopt this three-step mindset. First, stop trying to track 100 different things and start understanding the handful of categories they belong to. Second, prioritize. A bug that lets an attacker take over your entire server is obviously way more important than one that leaks a tiny bit of information. And third, use the modern tools and best practices that are already out there to find and fix this stuff systematically.
So, by shifting from being afraid of a giant list to having a clear framework, defending a web application starts to feel like a manageable, strategic process. It stops being about memorizing the shape of every possible key that could ever exist and starts being about understanding the types of locks you have on your doors. So the real question is, how secure are your locks?